I suddenly woke up and glanced at the clock. It was midnight. For some reason, my heart was racing, and I felt a strange sense that something wasn't right. I turned to look at my husband, who was sound asleep beside me, and then sat up in bed. My first thought was of my daughter, whose health had taken a turn earlier that afternoon. Feeling concerned, I decided to check on her. When I entered her room, what I saw took my breath away. My son and daughter were both emerging from the bathroom together. The sight of them stepping out at the same time gave me a jolt of anxiety. They both froze when they saw me, glancing at each other nervously. I began scolding them, asking why they were awake at this late hour and what they were up to. I directed my questions at Ahmad, but it was Sarah who replied. She said there had been a cockroach in the bathroom, and she had woken Ahmad to help her get rid of it. Ahmad nodded, confirming her story. I let out a sigh of relief and said nothing more. Still, my mind kept drifting back to unsettling thoughts, and I struggled to shake them. They were siblings, my own children. How could I even let such ideas cross my mind? I forced myself to stop thinking that way. Instead, I turned my attention to Sarah's health. She assured me she was feeling much better. I tucked them both into bed and left the room. Ahmad was 16 and Sarah was a year younger. They shared the same room but had separate beds. This arrangement had always been in place because Sarah was afraid of sleeping alone. However, it occurred to me now that Sarah was getting older, and continuing to share a room with her brother didn't seem appropriate. I decided that I would talk to my husband and have him arrange a separate room for Sarah. The next morning I got up early and went to wake the children. To my surprise, they were already awake. Ahmad had his phone in hand, playing some video, and Sarah was watching it intently. As soon as I entered the room, Ahmad quickly put the phone away, and Sarah stood up straight. I noticed her eyes were red and puffy, as though she hadn't slept at all. I asked Sarah about her health, and she told me she'd been vomiting all night. Hearing this, I became even more concerned. I decided to take her to the doctor that day and told her to stay home from school. Ahmad immediately protested, saying she shouldn't skip because she had an important test. He even offered to take her to the hospital afterward. Ahmad's interruption irritated me, and I started to scold him. Just as I was about to say more, my husband walked in. He told the kids to go have breakfast, then sat me down and said, "I've told you before, our children are growing up." When I started to speak, my husband interrupted me, looking visibly irritated. "Don't scold them so much and don't get angry. At this age, children rebel. But it seems you don't understand me when I tell you this." His tone was firm, and I could see the frustration on his face. His words stung, but I decided not to argue. I knew he would never agree with my perspective, so I chose to stay silent and left the room. After breakfast, I sent the kids off to school as usual. Over the past several days, I had been noticing that Sarah and Ahmed had started coming home later and later. Yesterday, when I asked Ahmed about it, he explained that they were both attending extra classes after school. But for some reason, I didn't fully believe him. To put my mind at ease, I decided to call the school principal today and get a clearer picture. When I spoke to the principal and asked about Sarah and Ahmed's performance, I was taken aback. The principal told me that neither of them seemed focused on their studies. "They're always lost in thought," she added. "Is everything okay at home?" Her words left me flustered. I quickly assured her that there were no problems at home. But after hanging up, I began regretting the call. I realized that something was definitely off, and these two were up to something. Casually, I asked the principal about the extra classes. Her response left me stunned. "Extra classes? Who told you there were extra classes? There's nothing like that happening here." I quickly changed the subject, pretending it was just a misunderstanding. But now I was certain that Sarah and Ahmed were hiding something. That evening, when they returned home, I was determined to get to the bottom of it. When Sarah and Ahmed walked in, They looked uneasy, almost guilty. I called out to Sarah, and she jolted, as if snapping out of deep thought. When I asked them why they were so late again, they repeated the same excuse about extra classes. This time, I could have confronted them on the spot and exposed their lie. But instead, I decided to take my maid's advice. Follow them and see for myself where they were going. My maid, who had been with us for years and knew all my secrets, had suggested this approach. Though I didn't like the idea of snooping, I felt I had no choice. So I made a plan to secretly follow them the next day. That evening I noticed something strange. Sarah and Ahmed exchanged glances frequently, avoiding each other's eyes. Their body language seemed nervous, and it only heightened my suspicions. I decided to take a different approach. I asked Sarah if she would sleep in my room that night. Her reaction startled me. She looked at me as if I'd made an inappropriate suggestion. Quickly she refused, saying, "No, I'll sleep in Ahmed's room as usual." Her tone was firm, and it was clear she had no intention of changing her mind. I didn't want to press the issue in front of Ahmed, so I resolved to speak to her in private. Later, when I found Sarah alone, I sat down beside her and prepared to have a serious conversation. Today, for the first time in what felt like ages, I sat down with Sarah to have a serious conversation. Only then did I realize just how far I'd grown apart from my children. It wasn't entirely my fault, of course. During the past 4 years I had been working full-time, and as a result, I couldn't spend much time with them. Our long-time housemaid had taken care of them in my place, which was why my children had grown distant from me. Just a few months ago, I became fully aware of this disconnect and decided to quit my job to focus on my family. But now I couldn't help but wonder, if I had made this decision earlier, would I be dealing with these difficulties today? As I sat across from Sarah, I noticed she was hesitant, unsure, and not speaking openly. Every time I asked her a question, she paused before answering, as if weighing her words carefully. My heart felt heavy, and my eyes brimmed with tears. I felt like I was crying tears of blood inside, tears of regret and frustration. After talking with her a bit more and trying to reassure her, I finally said, "Sarah, you've grown up now. It's no longer appropriate for you to spend so much time with Ahmed or to sleep in the same room as him. It's better if you either start sleeping in my room or let me arrange a separate room for you." I was under the impression that my kind, gentle explanation would make her see my point and agree with me. But that was nothing more than a misconception on my part. As soon as she heard my words, her expression changed dramatically. Her face turned red, and her eyes filled with anger. She looked at me in a way that sent a chill down my spine. There was something in her eyes, something that made my heart pound with unease. Unable to meet her gaze, I looked away. Sarah's voice, when she finally spoke, was defiant. "I won't move into a separate room," she declared. "And if you try to force me, I'll tell Dad everything." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me stunned and holding my head in my hands. I felt utterly lost. What should I do? That evening, when my husband came home, I told him everything that had happened. But instead of understanding my concerns, he turned the tables on me. He scolded me and said, "Why do you have to interfere? If everything is fine, just leave it alone." "But you don't understand," I tried to explain. "You don't see what I'm seeing." "I understand exactly what you're trying to say," he shot back. "But I'm telling you, stop overthinking. And if you were so concerned about them, you shouldn't have distanced yourself in the first place." With that, he returned to his newspaper, clearly indicating that he had no intention of continuing the conversation. I was left pacing the room, deeply unsettled. As I passed by the living room, I caught sight of Sarah out of the corner of my eye. She was walking quickly towards the stairs, glancing around as if making sure no one was watching. Her face was flushed, and she seemed unusually happy. Seeing this, I froze in my tracks. My bedroom door was ajar, and I watched through the opening as she disappeared upstairs. Curiosity and concern got the better of me. I followed her, making sure to move quietly. It was rare for anyone to go up to the roof. Most of the time it was a quiet, unused space. The roof had a single storeroom where old items were kept, and the maid only cleaned it about once a month. In winter, someone might occasionally take a chair up there to bask in the sun, but even that was infrequent. I usually had to tell Sarah to go up there if anything needed doing. So why was she going up there on her own today? When I reached the roof, I was startled to see Sarah unlocking the storeroom door. I couldn't help but wonder how she had gotten a key. This wasn't the key that we usually kept in the drawer downstairs. It was something entirely different. My heart sank as I realized that there was much more going on here than I had suspected. Sarah's sudden possession of a cell phone raised questions I couldn't answer. Who had given it to her? How long had she had it? As I stood there trying to process it all, I saw her quickly dial a number before stepping into the room. Her hurried actions triggered a sinking feeling, and my mind immediately jumped to Ahmed. Could he be involved? The thought alone was troubling, and the answer came soon enough. Shortly after, I heard someone climbing the stairs. I quickly moved out of sight, crouching by the side of the stairs, trying to stay hidden and see what would happen next. Ahmed appeared, holding a small bag, his hands trembling slightly as he glanced around nervously. I strained my eyes to figure out what was inside the bag, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make it out. Ahmed stopped suddenly, as if unsure whether to move forward. He stood still, took out his phone, and began typing something. Before I could gather my thoughts, my own phone started ringing loudly. The sound made both of us jump. I quickly silenced it, but it was too late. Ahmed had noticed. His eyes met mine and he froze. He asked, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation, "What are you doing up here?" Trying to stay calm, I replied, "The signal's bad downstairs, so I came up to make a call." "But what are you doing here, and what's in your hand?" As I spoke, I watched his face closely. I could see the flicker of panic in his expression as he quickly hid the bag behind him. "Nothing," he said, but his tone betrayed him. I could sense that something wasn't right. Hearing our voices, Sarah emerged from the storeroom, her face pale. She looked startled to see both of us there. Before I could press them further, Ahmed bolted down the stairs, leaving just me and Sarah. Her eyes were red and she seemed anxious. Her hands fidgeted constantly as if she were trying to hold something in. I stepped closer, gently placing my hand on her cheek, but she slapped my hand away, her anger flaring up instantly. "What kind of behavior is this?" I snapped, my own temper flaring. "Do you even realize what you just did?" But my frustration seemed to have no effect on her. She stood there, defiant and unbothered. I could sense the rebellion in her eyes, and it sent a chill down my spine. When I reached for her arm to try and reason with her, she yanked it away with such force that I stumbled slightly. Then she turned and walked off without another word. I stayed behind, burying my face in my hands. My mind raced with questions. What had I done wrong? Why were my children acting this way? I decided that the very next day, I would take Sarah to see a doctor. There was no way her recent behavior was normal. Something was wrong and I needed to figure out what. But that determination only made her more resistant, more unreachable. The same was true of Ahmed. The two of them seemed to be in their own world, one I had no access to. I felt completely shut out. That night I tried to talk to my mother, hoping for some guidance. But her response was dismissive. "It's just their age," she said. "Kids get moody at this stage. You're worrying over nothing." My husband, on the other hand, was even less helpful. He had started avoiding me altogether, as if the distance between us wasn't bad enough. I felt utterly alone, trapped in a home that no longer felt like my own. That day marked the breaking point. I felt as though my world was unraveling, one thread at a time. I had no one to confide in, no one who understood. I had a family, yet I was completely alone. I left home early that morning to meet a friend, leaving my 2 children at home since they didn't have school that day. I asked the maid to keep an eye on them, and she assured me that she would watch over them closely. When I returned around noon, the house was eerily quiet. Suddenly, I heard laughter and splashing sounds. Following the noise, I found Ahmed and Sarah throwing water at each other. Sarah's clothes were wet and clinging, making her appearance completely inappropriate, especially in front of her teenage brother. They didn't realize I was watching, so they continued their playful antics. I was taken aback by their behavior. These weren't the kind of actions that siblings their age should be engaged in. My anger boiled over. "What's going on here?" shouted. "Are you two out of your minds?" My voice startled them both. Sarah quickly dropped the hose and darted back into her room. Ahmed looked like he was about to do the same, but I stopped him. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Do you not realize that you're too old for this kind of behavior? You're siblings, but there are boundaries that must be maintained. Why are you so determined to cross them?" Ahmed stood with his head lowered, silently listening to my scolding. After a while, he quietly left the room. I thought perhaps my words had gotten through to him, but I was wrong. Later that evening, I saw them together again, still acting strangely, giving each other looks that I couldn't quite understand. I felt increasingly uneasy. I couldn't figure out what had come over them. Eventually, I decided enough was enough. I forced them to move into separate rooms. My husband wasn't pleased about my decision. He made quite a fuss, but I stood firm. I was seeing things that he clearly wasn't. I could no longer ignore my instincts. Even so, separating their sleeping arrangements didn't seem to make much of a difference. At night, they found ways to meet again. I took things further by making Sarah sleep in my room, while asking my husband to stay in Ahmed's room. Each night before bed, I locked my bedroom door and kept the key with me. For the first few nights, Sarah didn't sleep much at all. She kept getting up and trying the door, only to return to bed, restless and agitated. My husband said he noticed the same behavior with Ahmed. While he chalked it up to the two of them being overly attached, I felt there was more to it, something deeper that I couldn't yet explain. At least at night I could keep them apart, but during the day I had to rely on the maid. I told her to be extra vigilant and not let them out of her sight. Feeling somewhat reassured, I resumed working at a new job. One day, I returned home earlier than usual and was shocked to find the front door wide open. Anger surged through me. How could the maid be so careless? When I entered the house, I heard the maid's voice. Despite not wanting to, I paused and listened. Her next words were so shocking, it felt as if the ground beneath me had vanished. "Yes, sir, I'm doing exactly as you instructed. I've created the perception of inappropriate relations between the siblings, just as you wanted. I'm sure the devil will be pleased with this." That was the moment I realized another horrifying truth. This maid wasn't just any ordinary person. She was a witch practicing black magic. In her attempts to please her so-called master, she had been ruining my children's lives. In fact, she had already succeeded to some extent by using spells and deliberately corrupting their minds. When she noticed me standing there, the maid looked utterly stunned. Before she could say anything, I shoved her into a room and locked the door. I then rushed to my children's rooms, but what I found there shook me to my core. They were both in a terrible state, not fully conscious. Fighting the rising panic within me, I quickly took Sarah to my room to tend to her. She seemed intoxicated, barely aware of what was happening. After stabilizing her condition, I called the police and reported the maid. It turned out she was the very woman the authorities had been searching for, someone involved in heinous acts of black magic. With the maid gone, I decided to take full responsibility for my children's care. It was a long, arduous journey to bring them back to a normal life. The challenges were immense, but in the end I succeeded. These servants of the devil, driven by their sinister agendas, prey on innocent minds, spreading immorality and chaos. They take delight in violating the sanctity of sacred relationships that are meant to remain pure and untouchable. I've read before that when unholy influences tamper with bonds that can never be sanctified by marriage, it brings immense satisfaction to the forces of evil. May Allah protect us from such people. Amen.